All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for choosing to come to my talk. I'm super excited to talk to you today. We're going to do something really fun that you might be familiar with, and we're going to watch a little TV show. And I actually noticed that I put the wrong date, but Friday the 13th is a lucky date, so I think it's going to work out well anyway. This is today's cast. We have the architect, that's me. We have some product and business people. We have a tech team with both a tech lead and team members. And we have the big boss. And you're going to see, and we have a surprise character later, but you're going to see a lot of these. My name is Vilde, and I work in FINN and Nordic Schibsted marketplaces. We just changed names on Monday after the media houses were sold, so it's in a state of flux. And I'm the principal engineer for real estate, but I will use the term architect today because it fits more nicely with the domain design that we're talking about. All right, let's get into the prologue. And actually, some of you might have seen the prequel to this, which was 2 years ago at NDC Oslo. I spoke about 5 mistakes we made moving to platform teams in FINN. I don't know if anyone of you saw it, but at that point, FINN was not really in Schibsted marketplaces, or it was in Schibsted, but we were making FINN as one solution that was made from scratch in Norway, and Schibsted had other marketplaces that were also made from scratch in the other Nordic countries. And it was also, it was also made in what we call a horizontal way. So we have 4 main verticals: real estate, mobility, jobs, and re-commerce, what you typically know as torget, where you can buy and sell random stuff. And FINN was made horizontally, so each domain was across all the 4 verticals. So ad insertion was made centrally for all 4, search was made centrally for all 4, and any other product that you made, unless it was very specific to that vertical or business unit, was made horizontally. And then in 2022, we were trying to switch this into making vertical products on top of a common platform. And that's what I was working in. And then January 2023, there was a really big shift in the company. So instead of making every marketplace from scratch in each country, we switched the model in many different dimensions at the same time. So the marketplaces were merged into one organization, and the organization was built on each vertical. So there are real estate teams, there are jobs teams, there's mobility teams, and re-commerce teams, and there's a lot of platform teams. That's called foundation. And the goal in the long term is to make a product once that we can roll out to each country at the same time as transforming the horizontal model into a vertical model, so that each product can be more tailored to the context that the user and the customer is in. This is quite complicated. And we're using the FINN product as the basis. So we're trying to change the FINN product and roll that out into all the other brands. And at that point, I switched from working in FINN across most of the company into being the principal engineer for the real estate vertical. And this was pretty interesting because we had a lot of things inherited. We inherited all the teams, so there were no team changes. All the people working in the same team as before. Of course, all the tech and the software and the data was the same as before. Just because the org changes doesn't mean that the software changes. And we were already using domain-driven design and had organized FINN through domain-driven design for a few years. But the company was entirely different. So the teams were the same, but the organization around them was totally different. And the strategy was very different, which was very vertical. So now real estate goes all the way to the top management, and we have a very different focus than in FINN that was much more horizontal. So we'll take a tour backstage before we get into the real show. I assume a lot of you are familiar with some parts of domain-driven design, But the way that I like to think of it is that we use domains to partition our business and our systems so that they can scale, both so that we can have several teams working, or a lot of people, in our case hundreds of people, working on the same product without getting too much in each other's way. Of course, it's not unavoidable. It is. You get what I mean. So you can scale the work and you can scale the system. Also, so that if you have uptime or downtime, the domains don't interact too much with each other, and you can do product development independent in one domain without having to negotiate too much with the other people, so that the teams can have autonomy and local focus. And to do domain design well, you have to take the technical, the business, and the organizational context into account, and all of these should inform what the kind of right domains are for you at that point in time. And something that I think is quite important is that domains are a choice, and they should, in most cases, be a choice by a person and not by a big group. So in this case, I was making those choices. Because there aren't really any platonic domains out in the world that you can go and kind of measure or try to figure out exactly what are the perfect domains. So you have to evaluate the three different contexts that you have, and then make a choice and take a stand on what you think is right for this business at this time. And then kind of take a leap of faith. There are some rules. I'm sure there are other rules. These are the ones that I wanted to talk about today. The most important one is that you only have one team per domain. So teams never share a domain. But one team can maintain several domains for various reasons. Something else that's important is that the domain boundaries will change over time, and the domain maintainers may change over time. So in Finn, we have some domains that have been around for a long time, but actually the team working on them has changed, but the domain remains because it's an important part of the marketplace business. There are three main themes that we'll talk about today in the show. One is that domain design is an art and not a science. So there is some artistry in this. The second one is that you really need to meet your audience where they are and not where you are or where you think they should be. And it's all in their heads. So you have to understand what's in people's heads. And you have to understand that you can draw a good map, but if people don't understand it, it won't really work. Or at least in my case, it won't really work. So the part that's important here is what is the representation of the domains that other people have in their heads after I'm done explaining it. So if that should match as closely to what I was trying to say as it could, otherwise it won't really work. Okay, so this is today's set list. We have 2 seasons. First, we have to sketch the domains or identify the domains. Then we have 5 episodes: the point of view, the brainstorm, the mental model, the homework, and the conclusion. And there are 2 bonus episodes at a surprise time in season 1. And then season 2 is about printing this domain map or distributing it into other people's heads. There we have the floor plan, the whiteboard, the map, the epiphany. Very exciting. The info time, the deal with the devil. Oh, the devil is the surprise character. And then the coup, which is the grand finale. All right, are you excited? Yeah. Okay. So season 1. This started, as I said, January 2023, where I was in a semi-familiar state, but everything was different still. So the first step was to get oriented. I hadn't really worked with the real estate business before, only very peripherally. And I knew some of the teams involved, but they were not the teams that I knew the best in the organization. So a lot of new stuff and trying to understand the various parts. And so I had to understand the technical, the business, and the organizational context. And I knew more about the technical and the organizational side, but they were also changing, and I really didn't know that much about the business and what our strategy was. And something that was quite important to me is that typically in an architecture or technical leadership role, you should take a kind of glue and or oil position where you fill the gaps in the org that aren't filled by other people or by other teams. So you should be quite flexible and dynamic in what you're actually doing. And of course, maybe you're like presenting or you're visible in that sense, but yeah, you should take the shape that's missing and not really be in the middle. At least that's my take. But when it comes to domain design, because of some of the reasons I brought up earlier, I think this is one where you really should be the main character, or at least the kind of main brain thinking about this and making those choices and being the artist. So that was kind of important to me as I was starting this work, to be comfortable claiming that space and taking control of this design, because it's my map. It's kind of my responsibility to draw the boundaries. Of course, getting a lot of input from all the other characters in the cast. So domain design is an art, and in this case, that means that there's an artist, which is me in this case. And you should note that I've been working with domain design for a while, so I'm still kind of classically trained, and there's a lot of techniques in domain-driven design that I won't really go into today. So this is more, I guess, of a masterclass. But maybe some of you saw the event storming talk the other day. So event storming is a really good technique if you're kind of just getting into this. Okay, so back to getting oriented. One of the first things I did was that I just looked at what products do we have, who made them, and who maintain them today. This is quite small, but it's because I wanted to give you this is the real mirror board that I made last year. And what I did was I just looked at the FINN product, started with FINN because that's what we're basing our products on. And just took screenshots of the entire page, broke them down. So we use front-end composition, so different parts of the page are made by different teams. And I tried to break down who made what parts of these and who maintains them today. And in this case, actually, almost all of these teams were not in the real estate vertical, but in different departments, either in the foundational department or in other verticals, which was kind of bad news for us. And then the second step was to get into the business side. And this is where I think it was quite crucial to meet my audience or my stakeholders where they are and get to know them in their context. And one technique that I like to do there is to meet each stakeholder one by one. Here they're all together on the slide, but that's to make it look more fun. But one thing is that it should be one by one. And because that allows you to meet them on their turf and on their terms. And you don't really need to establish a shared terminology or a shared focus or anything shared across this group. You can meet each stakeholder where they are and understand their point of view. And then you should do the work on your side to integrate this into your working model or your mental model. So you create your own ubiquitous language, which you might recognize from domain-driven design in other talks. And the added benefit for me was that I actually didn't know that much about this business. So I was also using it as my onboarding into the business unit. And then in the background, as I was meeting with each stakeholder and understanding their point of view and what they thought was important and where they thought we needed to go in the next 1 to 2 years or 1 to 3 years. In the background, I was working on how can I integrate this into my own mental model and try to represent as much info as possible. And some tips here, I think, is that you should use whatever tool is best for you. I like drawing a lot, either on the whiteboard or digitally. And something to note is that typically, at least for me, what it looks like will end up in a totally different place than where you started. And so I never really share the early versions with anyone because then it kind of gets messy. You have to explain it to other people. I think I try to keep those private, more like a diary. And then later when I have a state that I think is easy to explain to someone or makes more sense, then I can start sharing them. So I had the kind of sketches with each stakeholder that were public between the two of us in each group, and then I had my own place where I was trying to integrate these. And to show you a version of my very first model was that I looked at all of our existing products, and I tried to map it onto this matrix that I was actually very into at that time, where the rows are the different kind of customers we have here, but I put the property as another kind of segment because we do deal a lot with the real estate property, and then the real estate agent, and then the property buyer. And I had this idea that we have a kind of basic version of each, like a minimal version of each thing, and we also have an enhanced, often more expensive version of those. But then we have these statistics products that didn't really fit in that model, so I had to have a stats column. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. And actually, something that I realized yesterday was that in the time since then, we've actually made a statistics product for buyers, filling out the matrix. So perhaps it wasn't such a bad idea after all. But I was very attached to the 3x3, and I was trying to cram everything in there. And then I tried to look at some prior art that we had in the vertical or in the company. And something that the strategy team did, I think, is to make this breakdown of a typical user journey in a real estate transaction, where you have the seller, the buyer, and different professional enablers like the agent or even banks or other people helping out in the selling process. And each of them have touch points to the others, but they have a different goal in each phase. And I thought this was quite interesting. So instead of using the existing products in the 3x3 matrix, I tried to map, okay, what are actually our existing domains and subdomains, and how do they map onto this thing? And then I made this. So this is intentionally censored. Everything today is because I wanted to show you what things really look like without having to worry about potentially revealing something sensitive. So I just censored everything. So I guess it's a TV show in a very conservative place. But it looks a bit different, but it has the 3 rows are the 3 segments that we had in the seller journey or the user journeys. And then we have the different phases of the selling cycle. And I tried to map what are the different products that we have. And on the bottom is a lot of supporting things that we have in the platform for each thing. And just a technical aside, or I guess a trick, is that I use a lot of versioning. So I use Miro, and then every time I make a change, I duplicate the whole frame. And I typically do minor changes in rows and then major changes in columns. Because sometimes you'll go down a path or a branch that you're not sure about, and then it didn't work out, but part of it did. And then if you undo everything, then you lose the part that was good as well. So I like to just keep everything. And you can see the frame is called copy of real estate ownership. So that's what happens if you copy the frame in Miro. And then so at this point, this isn't really a domain map, but it was still useful. So it was my internal mental model, and I kind of created it as a side effect or just for me. And at this point, I felt quite bad because I was working on the domain map, but I didn't really have any domain map anywhere. And I'd been working on it for at least a few weeks. And one of my coworkers said, I feel like you feel like you're procrastinating, but actually this is creating a lot of value, which I thought was an interesting point. So then I decided to publish this because even though it's not really a domain map at all, it could still be useful to some people. And at least there's no point in hiding it because this is at a stable state. And then, so until this point, I'd been kind of chill about the work. So it was a big part of my job, but there was no real urgency. At some point in the future, we would need a proper domain map, but there wasn't really any deadline. And I was also working with other stakeholders in a kind of chill way when they had time or they were in a good mood or they were bored. So it was very ad hoc or kind of dynamic. But then something happened in the organization that made it much more urgent to get a proper domain map for real estate. So the horizontal services that I talked about before, now there is going to be most likely a big push in the org to split those up and hand the pieces over to the verticals, which meant that we would get more ownership of the core parts of our product, which would be really good. And then it would be a really good idea for us to have an idea of where should we put those parts and not just put them randomly and then have to clean up later. So yeah, I really wanted them to have a good sense of what would the map or what would our domains be and who should work on them and how should we think about this. And this meant that I kind of had to push the business and product side to work with me a lot more. Which was, I mean, it's not like they're uninterested, but it's not really a part of their main job. And yeah, I guess they are a little bit uninterested, which is fair. It's kind of a nerdy thing, domain mapping, which is why typically only architects do it. And how did I do this? So I just stated that it was important. We had this big project. We need to figure out where we're going to put things. And I actually gave them all homework to force them to deal with the various parts. But of course, this is in an environment where we already have trust, and we've been doing this consensus building process with each stakeholder before, so I had a lot to work with already. And I'll show you a video that shows kind of the evolution from the user journey breakdown into the final domain map, and then we'll go through more of the steps step by step. And you can see I'm not totally following my versioning scheme, but it works well enough. Okay, so to zoom in a little bit, what I did was that I regrouped the parts based on the user journeys. We had identified some parts that were more crucial or more important to real estate that we didn't actually have ownership of in our vertical. So the products existed, but they were in other teams. And we had some idea of which ones were more important or more urgent to get control of and start integrating into our teams. And based on that, and based on, I guess, my own opinions, I grouped these into what I thought were our domains, but also based on what domain teams do we have in real estate already. So I tried to match it with the existing domains we had to not require too many huge changes, but rather just big enough changes to cover what we needed to do. And then it's not super easy to see here, but the idea here is that the black boxes are kind of sliders. So I made each stakeholder for each domain, which is the row. On the left, if it's a box, it's stuff that we already own. And if it's a different shape, it's stuff that we don't own. And then I made them kind of say, okay, for the next 1 to 2 years, where should we be in terms of how much we've actually taken over? And then the further right you go, the further, I guess, in the future, this should be taken over. And this was kind of working. All of them did it, but to varying degrees. And we got some interesting inputs. So it was kind of working. And something to note if you want to do this work is that not all stakeholders are created equal. So you should get input from everyone, but you should make your own call on who is more important and who is more important maybe for what area. So it's not like this is like everyone gets one vote on each thing. You just collect a lot of info and then you're the artist and you make your map on your own. It's not really something that's made by committee. At least that's my opinion. And then something cool happened. So this is the second bonus episode. The first one was when we published the not domain map. And one of my coworkers came to the office and said, "Hey, Vilde, I figured it out. You know, I know how we're gonna do it." And he was like, oh yeah, we have to tie it to the selling cycle from the real estate strategy. And then he showed me this map that, even though it's a different format, is the same map that I had already made and published. And I thought that was quite cool. Not because, oh, he kind of replicated my work, he didn't have to do that. That's not important. The map is just an artifact. What's cool is that he actually now, because of the homework, had been forced to actually think about it and process the information that we were trying to cover. And another thing that was cool is that we kind of chose similar domain boundaries, which was really cool because this is a kind of crucial stakeholder who knows a lot about the business. So the fact that we were matching was a really good sign. And then it was time to bring it all together and kind of settle on what I thought was the domain map that I wanted us to follow. And I had some, maybe not principles, but some things that I wanted to do for each of the 3 contexts that I talked about earlier. For the organizational context, I wanted this to align with our other departments. In particular, I wanted the boundaries to be compatible with the domain boundaries that we have in the foundational platform department. And that's because the domain teams in the platform department, they make their parts of the platform quite independently. And so if we had one team that was covering several kind of modules in that platform, it would be a little bit convoluted. And if we had several teams trying to interface with the same platform teams, it would also be hard for them to understand what we were trying to do. So, but we don't have as many teams as there are teams or parts of the platform. So I wanted it at least so that one team in real estate was generally responsible for one or more parts of the platform. And then on the technical side, I tried to match it as much as I could with our existing domains in real estate. So we already had products and systems and teams running, so didn't want to make too much of a change to keep the momentum. And on the business side, it was really a lot about understanding the strategy and postponing as many decisions as possible, but not the crucial ones. And then this is kind of the final result. And so we had some domains, and they cover kind of what we should verticalize in what order, and then we could be flexible in what we take over time in this big project. And for me, this was a good map because it kind of fits my brain, and I made it and was more for me. But you can see later that when I tried to show this to other people, it didn't really make that much sense to them. And that's because there's a lot of stuff that's not on this map, but in my brain, which is all the implications for the team. So there's a kind of second map that shows like, oh yeah, this team should go to this, is the yellow domain here, and then they should start taking over that, which also means that they need to give away the other parts that they have that are horizontal. So there's a lot of stuff that's not really visible. But it was we were kind of getting somewhere. So we had a domain map, we had some implications, we knew some big changes that we needed to make in the team and domain setup, and we were kind of ready to get started on the big project. So a little recap of season 1. We onboarded onto the business context by interviewing and working with stakeholders. We experimented a lot with the visualizations and the working models and mental models until I was happy with my understanding of what our domain should be for the next 1 to 2 years. So not trying to understand too much because things will change, but kind of understanding just enough. Okay, so let's start with season 2. The goal of season 2 is to present the domain map. We have the domain map for me, and now the goal was to bring it out to all the people who needed to understand it. And here the second 2 themes are really important. One is still to meet your audience where they are. In season 1, we did that by getting info from them, and now we're going to do that by providing info to them in a way that makes sense to them. and it's all in their heads. So we have to, you will see in season 2 that different stakeholders or different cast members have different things in their head already, and you kind of have to match that for them to understand what you're talking about. And you might be thinking, why would I spend so much time on the communications part? Technically, the domain boundaries are my decision, and I could just say, I made the map, now go do it. But that wouldn't really work. It wouldn't be a fun way to work for me, but also wouldn't really work because there's so many decisions being made all the time where I'm not there, and I don't really want to work in a way where I have to butt into every decision or every meeting to kind of dictate different things. Like, the point is to distribute as many decisions as possible and to make myself as redundant as possible. So I really need this map to exist in other people's heads, and for that model to be as similar to what I was really trying to do. Or, you know, at least, yeah. Otherwise, it's just like a dusty map that I made, and like the old school archetype where just drawings come out of a black box and no one knows what's happening in there. Okay, so in season 2, we'll go each cast member by cast member and meet them where they are, which is going to be pretty fun. Of course, we'll start with the boss. At some point, I was asked by our big boss, why do we need a domain map? And here I also could have just said, you know, oh, it's just my job to make one, and trust me, we just need one. But I really wanted her on board, and I wanted her to understand the later work. She doesn't really need to understand the domains directly, but she kind of needs to understand why we have different teams and what they're working on, and that it fits with our strategy. And to understand how we identified what changes to make in our organization. And as you might notice from the TV show, I quite like using a lot of metaphors. So I tried to find one that was real estate related. And I found one that I'm quite happy with, which is floor plans. So the key point is that we divide our house or apartment into rooms using a floor plan. And there are various ways that we do this. Some of the ways are user journey aligned. So we might have a living room for entertainment, or we might have an office for working, or we might have a laundry room for doing the laundry. And some are due to the resources that you need in that area. So that would be the technical context, whereas the user journeys would be the business context. So in Norway, it's quite common to have the washing machine in the bathroom, which from a user journey standpoint doesn't really make much sense. And for me, I actually think it makes much more sense in the kitchen where it's less expensive. The bathroom is the most expensive room you have, and you're wasting it on a washing machine, but that's a small aside. But the reason that we put it in the bathroom is because that's where the water is, and that's where the drain is. So you could make a better user journey by having a laundry room, or maybe putting it in your closet where you have all your clothes and the dirty laundry. But that's not really practical because then you would have to have water in every room. Or the kitchen and the bathroom might be co-located next to each other to save money on having the main water line. And then others are kind of compromises. So maybe you need something, but not enough for it to be its own room. For example, you might have a home office in the corner of your bedroom if you just work from home a little bit, or maybe you have a small place, or maybe you put a piano in the hallway. And some are just weird, because sometimes floor plans are weird and it's not worth it to change it because you inherited this apartment and there's something weird there, and you just keep it. And I think that's quite a good way to think about domain design as well, where you think about what you need and what you need most, and maybe what you can live without. And something else that's cool about this is that different architects will make different floor plans for the same people with the same kind of base resources. And also your needs will evolve. So maybe what you use your apartment for will evolve over time. Last year I moved to a new apartment because my old floor plan wasn't working for me after the post-pandemic, because I don't really like working from home. So I had a whole room that was useless. And currently I'm using the biggest bedroom in my place as a living room because that's what I need. Yeah, so each cast member requires a different visualization and introduction to the map, and the big boss doesn't need the floor plans, but the floor plan was a pretty cool way to do it. And then for the tech leads. So the tech leads were involved in this work, kind of checking off the different major versions. And a technique that I tried out there that was quite successful was just using the whiteboard. It's not really rocket science, but what's really cool about using the whiteboard is that you can automatically tailor the information to the context of the person, either by kind of understanding what they care about or by them just asking questions, and then you reveal more and more parts. So if you remember the rows in my domain map earlier, what I did here was that I drew just the row for this tech lead's current domain or what I thought would be a future domain. And then I started with, this is what we have now, this is what the and then the strategy says that we should go in this direction. And here are some likely first steps, and we have this big project coming up where we will get more products coming into real estate, and I think that this product is a good fit for your portfolio. What do you think? And there are a couple of reasons why this is cool. So you can tailor it to them, and you can control the pace of information being revealed, and you avoid distractions by the other points of the map. And you can publish a lot earlier than you can if you wait until you have a whole map that you can present to everyone at the same time. Everyone will immediately be, where am I in this map? Oh, I'm down there, but this thing is next to that thing, and actually that thing is a little bit further away. You have to be so detailed because everything has to be correct. And in this way, you can reveal a little bit and kind of get feedback early on without having the whole map ready, or at least ready for everyone to see it. So yeah, the tech lead doesn't need the whiteboard, but the whiteboard is cool. And then we had the business and product people. And they had already worked with me a lot on this because we had this big push with the homework before the big project. And so I just started from there. I was like, hey, so remember the last time we did this? I made some updates and I finished it. And I showed them what I showed you before. And I actually, at this point, I thought this was kind of cool. It's complicated. There's a lot of different parts, but I wasn't really understanding that for my audience, this was not really making that much sense at all. With the voiceover, you can kind of get away from some of that. But they didn't totally understand it. And then we made it even worse. Which is in an effort to harmonize the way that we were doing domain maps across the business, all the architects got together across all the verticals. And we decided to settle on one format. And we used one from a different department that in real estate we hadn't seen at all. And it's actually super complicated. So I really like it because you can kind of fiddle with all the different parts, and you can represent everything in your head almost. But it's just totally impossible for them to understand. And I will show you the details. So there's 4 dimensions with 3 alternatives each. So there's the color of the box and whether the border is full or dotted or not existent. And then there's the badge on the right with 3 options and the badge on the left with 3 options. And there's just a lot going on. So yeah, but in the architecture group, it was a big hit. But yeah, not so much with business and product people. So we went back to the one that we had kind of co-created because it wasn't perfect, but it was working better than the other one. But then I got a really good tip from one of them, which was that he was like, hey, we're trying our best with this. And they were really trying to lean in and understand what we were trying to do. but we don't understand it. Like, where are the teams? Like, what are you talking about? And this was a big epiphany for me, because I remembered, you have to kind of re-establish some of these truths, I think, once a year. Remember that for a lot of people, they don't really think about domains at all. They don't think about systems. They might think about products, but primarily they think about teams. And specifically, they often think about the team as an extension of the product manager. And this was a really good tip. So then I simplified the visualization. I'll show you a zoomed in version in a second. It removed a lot of details, because for engineers, often more details means that it's more informative. But for most other people, more details is just more confusing. So we simplified it a bit, which means that some parts maybe are not entirely correct, but it's still much better. And then we put teams with the current team names and faces on the map. Just having some small profile, like little avatars, really helped. And we started with today's state. So we said, here's the teams now with the domains. And then we showed, this is what we imagine next year. And here are the 3 big changes. I'll show you that in a second. So we highlighted the implications that were missing from the old version. But this was still done with a voiceover, because I don't think that this map really stands on its own, particularly outside of tech. And I think that's fine. So I'll show you what the map was trying to say. There were 3 big implications for the org. One was that we had a domain that was unstaffed. That was very important. So we were missing a team. And we could have given that domain to an existing team, and we considered that. But it was very important, and there was a lot of work to do over the next few years. And all of our teams were already quite busy with very valuable products. So no one really had a portfolio that could fit this domain. And so we started the process of staffing up a new team. And actually, this team just started last Tuesday. So it's been a long process to get them on board, but that's very exciting. And then we had a team that had an old domain that was kind of going away. It was very horizontal, and that would be split up over time and handed out to the proper domain, like other domains where they should be. So they got a new domain because we had another missing one. And then we had a team that was covering 2 domains today, but both of those domains would grow as we took on more responsibilities. And so it was kind of getting too big, and those domains were then kind of growing apart. They had been quite close together, but now they were growing in different directions in terms of what they were taking over. So we decided to split that, not immediately, but that was one of the kind of big changes that needed to happen. And that's also happened since. And then we had one domain that was kind of quite important for the business, but that we didn't have staffed. And we decided to wait with staffing them, or staffing it. And that was because even though it's quite important, we didn't really know exactly what the business wanted yet. So there's kind of a new strategic push, but it's not established exactly how it will happen. And then there were so many different options for how this could work. It could be that, the different parts actually were covered by our existing domains, or it could be that we needed an entirely new team working in a different way, or it could be that actually we didn't really need to do much work at all. Like, it's still very open-ended. So we decided to not do anything about that. So the product and business side, they really need to understand where are the people in this map, put the people on the map. And then for tech teams, I get to use my very favorite trick, which is info time. Just a second. And info time is I like to brand things. So it's basically a format that works quite well for me. And that's I gather a tech team. Everyone in the team is invited. It's optional. They get some info about what we're going to talk about. And then the agenda, typically it's an hour. The agenda is maybe 10 to 15 minutes of some intro, maybe 5, depending on the topic. And then I have some other things, kind of chunks of info planned, but I wait for the questions and then I give the answer. So maybe it's kind of audience-driven what the specific agenda is. And then there's always, or usually snacks, if I have time. And this is another way that where you can kind of tailor things automatically to what people are thinking about, because they want to know, okay, what does this mean for me? And what are we doing? Because especially developers, very intolerant of other information. So to get everyone on board in the teams, you get an in-person spoken run-through of their domain. I might use the whiteboard for some parts, but typically it's just speaking. So the tech team gets info time per team. Otherwise, the tailoring doesn't work. Is there a hand?
Yeah. I'm just wondering approximately how many people are in the room when you do that kind of talk?
The whole team. So some of our teams, it's from 5 to maybe 10, 11, 12 people maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Now we're getting towards the end, so it's getting a bit intense or exciting. Now the surprise character, the devil, appeared. So just a short background. There was something that had been in 2 domains in the past, and I really thought it should be 1 domain now, because I don't know that I didn't think it made sense at the time, but for historical reasons it was 2 domains, but it was very not necessary at this point to have them still separate. So I had said we will take over those 2 parts and we will merge them, and actually those are 1 domain. And so because of the rules, they should be in 1 team. But then something had happened on the staffing side, which was that the team that was taking over that domain was quite busy. They had a lot of other stuff temporarily, and there was another team that was kind of bored temporarily. And the devil here is one of the engineering directors who covers the staffing side. We've split the technical and the personnel responsibilities. And he said, what if we can keep these 2 parts separate, and then both teams will have something to do. That will be really nice. They're very excited to work on it. And, it kind of made sense. And I think it does make sense to make those compromises sometimes. So I made the deal with the devil. And then we had an info time session where I presented this compromise to the tech team. And because I'd been doing 1 team each time, I'd already mentioned this to someone else, and this team had heard, and they had planned a coup, which was very exciting. So they had actually, it was very fun. I don't know if I can describe how fun it was, but it was very fun. It was different developers had clearly talked and presented this you said that last time, and then why should they get, it doesn't make sense, it should be in 1 domain. And I thought that was really, really good. So they kind of, exercised the devil, and he ran away. And I thought they were totally right, and they used my own arguments against me. They were like, you said this should be 1 thing, and why are we splitting it? And also this is very temporary, so doesn't actually make any sense. And yeah, I got very excited and then changed my mind. So broke the deal with the devil and broke the compromise. So in season 2, we saw that we had to meet our audience where they are to get them to understand the information that we're trying to explain to them. And the different stakeholders need different things. So product and business need to understand the teams. Tech leads work well with whiteboards, or using the whiteboard works well. I love info time. I really would recommend trying it out for any topic. If you have an all hands afterward, if you're responsible for some sort of a communication, there's something new happening, just meet with each team and explain it to them in words, drop slides. It's just magic in my experience. And then we have analogies for people further away from product and tech who just kind of need to understand ish what this is about, and then they're like, okay, that sounds cool. Okay, so we're almost done, but not entirely. We have a bit of an epilogue. So what has happened? I would say this story concluded towards the end of 2023, and what has happened since. So we had the 3 big changes, plus a non-change that we didn't want to do. And I guess I mentioned this earlier, but yeah, we had Team A in place. We split Team C in 2. We are not staffing Team D, but we didn't actually get a new domain for Team B. And that's because they got a new domain, but it's not big. So we'd overestimated how much work we were supposed to do in this area. So they have a new domain, but they still don't have enough to do. So yeah, they got the domain ownership, but they're still looking for more work. But then something else happened, which is that we had overlooked something. And a new focus area arrived, and that was perfect because Team B didn't have anything to do. So now they have another little domain, and that will be quite fun. And it fit quite nicely with their other domains. So even though one team can own several domains, they should kind of be neighboring or in other ways, in some way compatible, either in the competence you need to make that or in their kind of business area. And then we have a director's cut, just some fun things that I didn't have a good place for. You remember that there's an artist here, and that you should, if you're making domain design, you should make those boundaries and be the artist and take up the space and make those decisions. And because we have 4 verticals, we actually had 4 architects doing this domain design at the same time. And what did they do? So one of the other verticals, they went all in on domain teams. So they set up all new domains, and then they allowed developers to apply to new teams forming around those domains. And then they left only minimal maintenance in the legacy setup, which I think made sense for them because of a bunch of reasons that I don't have time for, but it's because they're a little bit earlier on in this merging, the Nordic merging, whereas in real estate we're keeping things a bit more separate. One went all in on user journeys and jobs to be done, and organized teams mainly around those. And one was the first vertical to go through this big transformation, and the first ones to work Nordic, so they didn't really have time to think about domains at all. So there they just made practical choices along the way in the context of this project, and they just made local decisions, local changes, and they didn't really review the big picture that much. And I expect that they will probably do that after. And I think that also makes sense for them because, yeah, they just had to get through the project, and everyone needed to just be on board and do what needed to be done. And then something that if you start working on this or other things, you have to do quite a lot of experiments on how to visualize something or how to explain something to different kinds of people. And I did a lot of experiments that never got anywhere. And one of them was this kind of temperature gauge, trying to explain where we are now and where we are soon and where we should end up. And I spent so much time trying to figure out how to make the temperature thing work. And then in the end, it was replaced with a small table on the slide. So you don't always know where you're going to end up. And actually, in maybe not a lot, but like a quarter of these cases, I find that a small table was maybe the right solution after all. Okay, so we're almost done. Let's just review the main takeaways. We have our 3 themes. Domain design is an art and not a science. So you should be the artist. Meet your audience where they are and bring them where you want to go, or let them take you for a ride. You can choose. And it's all in their heads, so make it click and make it stick, and really focus on what works in their heads. And that's it. Thanks for watching.